Welcome to the Indian Gaming Association's The New Normal webcast. My name is Lisa Johnson. I'm the conference manager for the Indian Gaming Trade Show and Convention. I'd like to share a few housekeeping tips before we get started. Everyone is muted by default except for our speakers. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box and they'll be brought up at the end. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Victor Rocha, conference chairman of the Indian Gaming Association.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Victor Rocha. I'm the conference chairman of the Indian Gaming Association. My co-host is Jason Giles, and welcome to the New Normal, your go-to source for discussions on the gaming industry and key issues facing Native American tribes. Jason, good morning.
Morning, Victor. How you doing?
This is one of the rare ones where it's just Jason and I. We don't do this usually. We have guests, and we're always trying to find out what people are thinking about different issues. And this particular one, which is about the government shutdown, Jason and I were discussing what we thought were really important issues, and Jason felt that this was one that we couldn't wait. By the way, we're going to be in Minnesota next week, so we won't be able to be on air. We'll be on panels discussing these very issues. Actually, on Wednesday, I will be discussing sweepstakes prediction markets with the Minnesota tribes and some of the legislators there and stuff like that. So we continue our march across the country. Jason, how are you doing, man?
Good, Victor. And just keeping with the midget real quick, I think that is an important thing to highlight on Tuesday is Tuesday afternoon. We've got a bunch of Minnesota legislators coming by in the afternoon. And, we're going to talk about sports betting in Minnesota and some other issues. But Victor, the way this stuff and the couple of articles that have come out recently, stuff about Underdog and crypto.com, and then where everybody is maneuvering right now in the, event contract space under the CFTC, which is just doing nothing whatsoever, not even a small roadblock, not even a hiccup to stop this.
I just sent you that letter of CFTC staff issues no action letter regarding events contracts. That was released today. And then Dan Bernstein said today is the final day where there's more than one person on the CFTC's 5C commission. So today's the last day for all of them. Now it's what do they call it in the Soviet Union when one person controls everything? It's one of those things. Politburo, one of those names.
Well, no, they all answer to one person, that's for sure, whether it's Stalin or Putin. But
Yeah, or Trump.
yeah, and so this stuff is it's doing what we feared it would do. It's just too tempting for other folks to stay out of it, regardless if certain states are active and actively trying to prevent it. As long as they've got that, imprimatur of federal action, these guys don't feel like they have anything to fear from state action. So
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jason. Last night, and this is no joke, I was drafting a fantasy team of lawyers that are going to take this to the Supreme Court. So I had Neil Cattell.
yeah,
I'm sure Neil Cattell's in there. And there's a guy, probably David Boyes. Will he go for our side or their side?
yeah.
So that's how it's going to take. It's going to take it all the way to the Supreme Court.
Mhm.
And, from my layman's brain, you know what I mean? I just find it difficult to believe that these new tech bureaucrats are going to convince the Supreme Court that, this is not gambling. When they promote it as gambling and it doesn't need to be regulated. And this is, I know how these things go. I know, I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand all the intricacies of these cases, but I know enough to see how this Supreme Court reacts to people. They are anti-bureaucracy, they're small government, and they're going to take it up to the Supreme Court and say, listen, we don't need any control over gambling because, we used to deal with pork bellies. Now we're gamblers. You know what I mean? So and it's going to take a really good Supreme Court lawyers to explain this. That's why we need to start putting our fantasy teams together, you know,
Well,
because that's where
and
it's going to go.
well, really raising money because these guys have unlimited money, and the states do too. But for Indian country, it's going to get expensive,
Well, I
and
think Montana's not going to fight it. You know what I mean? South Dakota's not going to fight it. You know what I mean? But California's going to fight it. Illinois is going to fight it. New Jersey, Maryland. There's 50 U.S. attorneys on that. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
But
So
to
it's a
think,
states' right issue. You know?
and, to bring this into the shutdown, to think any of this will get better under a shutdown is, it'll just roll out even faster and further, and it won't even matter, if Quintenz isn't the chairman by then, it won't even matter. So
Right. Well, and the second part of that statement about the final day of the 5C commission, he goes, no plans have been shared to fill any of the empty seats.
mhm. So this is for Indian country, with that 60% of our gaming revenues go to essential government services. This is you know I don't know. I mean, at some point, Victor, if you start to see a decrease in the volume, especially those tribes with sports books and everything, you're almost going to have to look at partnering with somebody on this stuff. But that's a ways down there, and we're going to keep
Yeah.
trying
Yeah.
trying to fight it. But at our mid-year, please come by, because if you're a state like Minnesota that's still trying to work all this out, the bus might have left the station on it all.
Well,
And California, I
and
mean,
Jason, the bigger issue there is that, Minnesota is considered the gold standard of gaming compacts. You know
mhm,
what I mean? You don't touch IGRA and you don't touch the Minnesota gaming compacts. It's just one of those third rails of gaming. And is it irrelevant? You know what I mean?
yeah,
Gaming's at the border. Gaming is you can download an app. So the answer is, are those compacts outdated? And what used to be a firewall is now a hedge. You just step over it, you know?
right. How about, I mean, I heard some disturbing stuff today just driving in, listening to sports talk radio, but
Oh,
uh,
Jesus, support there.
somebody offhandedly they're like, I don't even know what the big deal is. Like, if you're in a state like California where there's no sports betting, just go get a VPN and locate yourself in a state where it's legal.
Well, Jason,
Then they
Jason, yeah,
sparked a whole discussion. Apparently, the new Apple phones have a built-in VPN that you can just activate.
everything
And
does. Everything has a built-in VPN. If you get a speed tester, they have VPNs. There's VPNs everywhere. They're so integrated already that it's
uh,
easy. Um, but you're absolutely right. You know what I mean? At some point the tribes say, "Well, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this?"
yeah,
The fight's not over yet. Does that mean exclusivity's gone? Yeah, of course it is. Download an app. You know what I
right.
mean? That's the reality. You know what
Yes.
I mean? I hate to burst anybody's bubble, but the like we said, the rat line from sweepstakes, they were always going to move to prediction markets once they came out. And by the way, we knew nothing about this concept of gambling as prediction markets until January, right before the inauguration. We were getting ready to go to Barcelona, maybe December. We started seeing articles right before Christmas,
Mhm.
and so this is a new, we got sweepstakes on the rope and they rat line over to predictions, just like we said last week. So what does this mean? You know what I mean? Again, it's got to work its way through the Supreme Court, states' rights. I think what was interesting to me was Underdog making the announcement, yet they're trying to get into regulated markets. So do they just walk away and go for the prediction markets? I think the answer is yes, absolutely. You don't need the license. You don't need regulated. You don't need, you can self-certify AML, right?
Right.
So why would they go to the regulated market? And again, it goes back to states' rights, states that have used this money for the bottom line. Um, Listen, it's always been in Wall Street against Main Street. What else is new,
Right.
right? You
Well,
know,
and that's the interesting thing is, I don't see too much worry from Wall Street on a
Oh,
lot of
please.
economic stuff, but uh, a shutdown at this stage where, a couple things, and we're going to have a good economics panel at the mid-year as well to talk about some of where we are right now in the country. But, the McDonald's CEO was out there yesterday saying we're seeing an impact on our
Yeah, I read
lower
that.
income
Yeah.
customers. We were seeing a definite demarcation between high income customers and low income customers who are definitely cutting back. And then he even referenced what's going on in Las Vegas, and which started a whole new discussion on, is Vegas doing it to themselves because all these corporate owned hotel resort casinos are just gouging people at this point,
Well,
apparently.
over the weekend, you started seeing the return of the $1 margarita, and will
Oh,
we ever
really?
see the $3 roast beef dinner
Well,
again, or $5 roast beef
I
dinner
had
again?
somebody text me today and say, "Is this real?" In October, Flamingo's advertising $18 a night midweek rooms, Tuesday to Thursday. And I was like, man, if it is,
Listen, the Flamingo's
that's
the
80s
closest thing they
price.
have to a hostel on the strip, man. That is the closest thing they have to a
I
hostel.
know, I know.
So,
If there's one place I could do
good
it,
luck.
and
Tennis shots are more than that.
yeah, exactly. But there is something afoot, concerning the consumer, and that's our wheelhouse, and we've just got to keep an eye out. And that's why, I hope you come to our membership meeting and you'll hear some good economic discussion on this, because we've got all these pressures on Indian gaming,
Right.
and our tribal governments similarly have all these pressures from whether federal funding is going to be coming, or grants, or all this other stuff. It's so tenuous right now. So if we're staring down the barrel of a government shutdown, the only thing that we have to reference are the previous shutdowns. And as bad as anyone, or maybe no one remembers them because didn't impact you whatsoever, but for any country, it does. And almost immediately, all of a sudden, the park service personnel you worked with aren't showing up or aren't there. The EPA people, the Corps of Engineers people, there's just a litany of federal contacts on a day-to-day basis that Indian country really relies upon. And the last shutdown under the Trump first term, was 3 months long. Uh, just to remind everybody, who knows how long it could have gone on for, but for the air traffic controllers finally going and saying, this is getting out of hand, and they didn't have enough people showing up to work every day. The skies were too crowded. That apparently there were some near misses, and that kind of freaked everybody out, and they just went and did the continuing resolution, which was the only solution anyway. And that's kind of what we're facing at this point. Uh, but interestingly, you have the House and the Senate who have passed a lot of appropriation bills out of committee, and they've kept the government pretty much funded at where it is right now after all the Doge cuts and all this other stuff. They've kept the funding for what agencies are left at a pretty decent level, if not plussing up some of them. And that that kind of bill has no chance of getting through the House of Representatives because Johnson doesn't have the votes. There's a hardcore 10 to 15 Republicans that want to cut the US government another 20 to 40%, more in line with the budget that Trump submitted. The Senate knows that unless they're going to just scrap the filibuster, uh, they're going to have to compromise, and they're going to probably have to keep everything at where it is right now, and also get rid of all the poison pills regarding abortion, and now vaccines, all this other kind of stuff that's out there. Uh,
Well,
that
you know what? Titus is talking about putting that the taxation into the military bill. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? She was talking
because
about attaching it.
she knows that will pass.
Right.
Uh, but Victor, that's the thing. Every year we play this game, everyone else wants to stick some, must pass thing in the military defense bill as well, because they know they'll separate that out and pass it so that the troops get paid, and, all the service repair bills are getting paid and everything stays on time in the military. But it usually doesn't work out that way because it just gets too littered up with, oh, if you do this, I'll do that. It usually falls by the wayside. McConnell was more successful at putting stuff in there than others, but you know, we're at a really strange place right now because the Democrats are saying, and rightfully so, you've already shown us it doesn't matter what budget bill your Republican-led Congress passes. You guys are coming back to take away the money that you don't want to spend. The judges and courts are slow to act on that. And then also they come in with what's called a rescission package, and they did this to, wipe out the public radio and the public, funding for the public stations and everything. And those rescission packages only take a simple majority, so it can sort of avoid the filibuster. So what if Democrats negotiate in good faith, get something passed? They have no, uh, they have no confidence that Trump and the OMB, Russell Vought, are just going to come right back and say, we're taking all this money back and not going to spend it. Um, and then the Republican majorities just, dutifully go on and pass it. Murkowski and Collins go, I don't know, this could be trouble, like they say every time, and then never do anything. Or they're the only two that vote against it, and they still have enough votes. So it's really, it's unfortunately, Victor, you know what it is? It's the culmination of ever since when Boehner and Obama cut that deal. Ever since then, this government hasn't been operating on a normal fiscal regulatory schedule. Everything is continuing resolutions. And, the first 5 years they got away with it. And then you're always wondering, like, how can a country operate like this? Does the budget even matter? You just start to wonder if they're just going to add 1 to 2 percentage points and just keep the budget going up and the budget deficits going up. But that's exactly what's happened 11 years later after that grand compromise that cost Boehner his job. Um,
I
we
thought
haven't
that.
moved on from that time, and nobody really wants to because either no one has the guts to really cut the government, or I don't know what it is. It's a strange thing. It mostly is on Congress that they don't have the guts to assert their co-equal branch powers and rein a lot of this stuff in. So that's really what it comes down to. So we don't that much good news on that. We were hoping to have a couple of our partners because we are doing a big Unity Week in DC, the week of September 15th. I encourage anyone, to come out to DC. It's going to be crowded, but it's really the last week before a shutdown where we can sort of talk about a lot of this policy stuff and also get before congressmen and senators before a shutdown. But tribal leaders have got to know, uh, hey, look, this is it. If you're not preparing for an October, November, maybe into Christmas type shutdown, now's the time to do it because it didn't work out well for Indian country last time. It's bad. It almost took near misses in the skies for them to finally relent. But Indian country was suffering almost from week one. We had a lot of reports coming in, whether it was schools not having enough personnel to remain open. Then the onset of winter, roads weren't being cleared. That some of the tribes work with the Park Service and BIA folks to keep their roads and highways clear. It wasn't happening. They were furloughed. So we've got to just again, the national organizations are going to come together and try to get a better game plan than last time. But man, it's been such a shock the first 6 months of this, and then here we are in the fall, not even 10 months in now, Victor, and we're having to relive it all over again coming October 1st. And
Yeah, it'll be interesting because, remember at our show, the NIGC was saying, we're an independent organization. We rely on finances from the tribes to pay for it. But then, it turned out
right,
that the credit card for travel was handled by the BIA, and we lost everyone from
that's
the
right.
BIA.
That's right.
I'm working on the agenda for G2E, you know what I mean, with the NIGC people, and will they have to pull out at the last minute in
Right.
in November? You
Yes.
know what I mean? And right now it feels like a game. Well, it is. It's a game of brinksmanship. You know what I mean? The Dems are saying, listen, we have to make a stand to prove
Mhm.
that we exist. And the Republicans are saying, who?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and this played out in a smaller way back in February, March. There was a lot of discussion amongst Democrats. Should we just let the government, shut down because they're cutting us out of all the budget talks? And at that time, Schumer and I guess Jeffries, they made the call. They like, no, look, they'll do more damage if the government is shut down.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember that.
And, guess what? They went ahead and did whatever they wanted to anyway in terms of the Doge cuts and all that. Uh, getting rid of Department of Education and all kinds of crazy stuff that you just would have assumed was unconstitutional. But here we are, and some judges have ruled that a lot of this money. They just reinstated a woman at the FTC who they said Trump illegally fired. But I don't even know if that woman still wants the job. I
Right.
think she's going back, but you know what I mean? We're up against it with this CFTC stuff, and the courts can't move fast enough. And it's sort of we're in this age now where people are kind of baking that in and just like screw it. It doesn't matter what the court says 6 months later after the fact. We've got a whole infrastructure going.
But that's all part of the normalization process. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? We've been dealing with this stuff since, Columbus landed,
Well,
So
it's sort of it's moving at a pace now, and I think a lot of the technology, assists it in helping move much faster than the government can keep up. Uh,
technology and lawyers, that's who you're dealing with. You know what I
well,
mean? No offense, Jason.
and I'm not even sure the lawyers can keep up with it, other than you get a lot of these think tanks that are just saying go do it, and a lot of the tech people think that way too. Just do it, and worry about the ramifications later if there are any. So this push though, Victor, it's really a scary time because we've talked about it several times and we always bring up crypto, but man, they are going to push this crypto stuff on us one way or the other. And uh
Biggest Ponzi scheme in history, man.
it,
You know what I mean?
but where can you hide from it if they're going to tie up the US dollar into crypto, making meme coins one for one. Uh,
Right.
our currency doesn't have to be the world's currency. There's no guarantee that it's supposed to be the world's currency forever. You can just look at what happened to empires when all of a sudden their currency was devalued, whether it was, Rome or Spain or England. I mean, you can just a lot of times they just, they went bankrupt before they, lost any big battles. So uh, it, it's a it's really just unprecedented right now. And our tribal casinos are asking, how much should we start looking at? Should we make plans to regulate crypto? I mean, I think they need to think bigger than that, Victor. Why not just incentivize their customers to start using, maybe we don't get those casino chips anymore, Victor. Everyone just has their own chip, their own meme coin or whatever. And
You know,
you
listen, that's always been the promise of mobile. You know, that's always
right.
been the promise of mobile is this ease of use. And the problem with mobile is the fees. You know what I mean? It's like, I had um solar, and let's look at solar. I talked to a solar guy recently, and the whole thing was it wasn't saving any money. I just had a new partner in the middle of it. Instead of me, the son, and a new partner and the electric company. You know what I mean? So everybody wants to get between you and your money. And I think mobile has just done a really bad job of making it easy. You just feel like you're getting, nickeled and dimed every time you use it. Crypto is the promise of it is easy use and low fees.
Right.
And that's what prediction markets is about. You know what I mean? Low fees and you don't have to deal with and so that's why it's such a threat to FanDuel and DraftKings. And that's why FanDuel announced yesterday they have a new prediction market. And when I got the call from those guys, they said, listen, Victor, we're not going to bring sports betting into California. We will be in California. We'll be doing, who's does a nipple slip at the Academy Awards. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I don't believe them. I don't believe
Yeah.
anyone. I think that the opportunity is so big, it's an existential threat if you don't do it. So Absolutely, tribes should be looking at it. Absolutely, and I will have sessions at our show. Will be the big issue is that half of these people in crypto are a bunch of scammers and grifters, and they're
Yeah,
just as big a jerk as everyone else that we've seen. And the promise of crypto means the promise of bullshit half of the time,
right.
you know? So who is good, who is bad? Well, that's kind of where we come in, Jason. You know what I mean? And
Well,
we bark and we bite and we try to throw out the ones that we don't think are honest. And look, I have a ponytail. You can trust me, you know?
but how about this though, Victor? Like, let's say, I mean, I keep using, the big retailers. They have every reason to start issuing their own meme coins to customers, and you'll get all their goods 10% cheaper or something like that, because they're going to save a lot on credit card transaction fees and everything. And so, I mean, the problem is, what if you're a solid, well-known corporation with, bedrock credit, you're not going anywhere. But we saw it already once this year when a lot of those banks that were heavily invested in crypto all of a sudden couldn't meet their deposits. And that could easily happen at, a casino, a Target, a Walmart, where all of a sudden everybody, decides, I don't want to use this anymore. And you know how it is. You leverage everything, and if everyone comes at once, says, "Here's your coins back. Give me my dollars, my one for $1." You get a run on stuff, and there's plenty. There's a gentleman. I hope we can someday get him on. Ben McCormick is his name. He wrote a big article recently, breaking all this down, and just really the only one I've read, only economics person I've read that just said, this is insane. This is we're going right down the path that Sam Bankman-Fried already warned us about, that this run on the crypto banks warned us about. Even the regional banks earlier in the year that were sucking wind, and the Fed had to go in and bail them out. Right towards the end of Biden's term. The warning signs are already there, and again, there's a lot of, I don't know what else to call it besides passivity in this country right now, Victor, where we're
Wow.
just going to plod along and accept tariffs at whatever rates he's setting them at. Uh,
Soldiers in the street, National
soldiers in the
Guards
street,
armed, and
yeah,
National Guard picking up trash in Washington, D.C., and
uh,
weed
about
whacking.
tariff agreements that you know I guess we're still hammering out the details with England. That was like 4 months ago. Japan's like, wait a minute, we never said we'd give $500 billion of our money to invest in America. I mean, it's just all these crazy things that we just sort of just gloss over. But I don't. You're upending the world order, and then you get what you saw in China yesterday or today with the huge military parade and
Well, look at, and
autocratic
you're not
dictator.
even mentioned Modi, Putin,
Yeah,
and
that's what I mean. They're
Xi,
there
and
watching.
does anybody else see the irony of tech bros, trying to do the stable coin 1 to 1 of the American dollar while still trying to destroy the dollar? I mean, does anybody else see that irony there? So look
But
at the bottom line, Jason, is that the tribes need to understand that regardless of how you feel about it, things are moving, and you need to
right,
understand what this new reality is. Whether you agree with it or not, that's inconsequential. You know what I mean? You need to understand where these things are going. The banks are moving that way because there's an opportunity to get in there and make some money. Every day I get these crypto alerts of some billionaire who's sitting on 5% of Bitcoin that nobody knows who they are. And now they're worth, $20 billion or $100 billion. And so, it's a system trying to figure out how to rig it in their way.
right,
Everybody's trying to rig it in their own way so they can take advantage of it, whether it's Web3 or crypto or something. They all want it to be, they want to own it. And then you have a government that is actively pushing us into it without really considering the consequences and ignoring, there are no adults in the room or at the controls of the aircraft.
mhm.
That's kind of what we're
Well,
doing. So what do you
and
do?
and it's all tied in too, Victor. And this is where our government is really going to miss the ball. This AI stuff. Now, I mean, I think people are starting to wonder if it's overhyped and and their stock evaluations are overvalued, and there's not much return to see. But regardless, if you want to use the .com comparison, okay, everything fell apart in 2000, but man, 5 years after that, like all that stuff that was good in 1999 was even better. And then we're where we are today. And now the phone is our computer. I mean, I think this happens in less time than it took, the internet to take over. Just you saw Zuckerberg putting together some dream team for super intelligence, paying like all these just kids like $200 million salaries to come in and develop, they call it super intelligence, where the computer is outthinking us and moving on towards things that we just can't do fast.
I have an idea. I have a strategy. So what we do, all the bills, instead of AI, it means American Indians. So what we do is that we pass them and we just take the American Indian and we say AI,
Can
and
we get
that's how you do it. Yep,
off
I'm
of
telling you.
American Indian?
Yes, 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 yes. You guys
Uh,
just aren't thinking it through, man. You know what I mean?
so
You guys aren't thinking outside the box like I do. You know
right,
what I
but
mean?
but it all sort of comes together, right? If you're going to have a new medium of exchange and a new way of just the this artificial intelligence. I mean, it conceivably, Victor, it will run everything in the end because it can do stuff 24/7 and never have to sleep. You would think that would make our markets more stable. You don't wake up and overnight traders have done whatever, or things have moved around the world. It's going to be on top of it, but obviously that's sci-fi
They can't move to
101.
Mars fast enough for me, man. They can't move to Mars fast enough. You know what I mean?
They,
But the big issue that I see is that you still have a limited consumer adoption. You know what I
right,
mean? It's moving that way. You know what I mean?
can use
But
it,
is
right.
it there yet? Is it, the American dollar, that big bunch of nickels and pennies that you have in the corner and the dollars under your mattress? Those are all invalid now. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean,
Until
yeah,
you have to start paying your food with it. But then look how quick, tap got adapted during the pandemic. Now it's
right.
you can't live without it.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And that was really fast, 5 years now.
Well,
You know?
for America, they had it in Europe and Asia long
Right. Oh
before
yeah.
it was.
I remember at Gigsy
Yeah,
when that was the big, you tap it. Ugh,
yeah.
I don't know. You know,
Yeah, I felt like I was in 10 years ahead of time when I
where'd
was
my
in Europe.
information go? Where'd it
Yeah,
go?
exactly.
Now you're
Tap it.
like
What are you
throwing your
talking about?
phone at
Tap?
them, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. But
So, but Jason, let's get back to the subject here.
well,
What are we looking here now? Could the NIGC be sidelined? Are we talking about
yeah,
audits? What do the government, how is this going to affect the tribes?
yes. You could start with for the gaming industry, the NIGC ostensibly will be much more short-staffed. They've had some downsizing because of the Doge stuff, but they assure me, and they very affirmatively assured me in Oklahoma that, hey, we're pretty well staffed up right now. We've moved to a new building over in Southeast. The DC headquarters is fine. We're getting our work done. The regional offices, I still get, I was in New Mexico 2 weeks ago. Things are slow coming out of the regional offices, whether they want to admit that or not. The tribes are not getting the responses they used to. So certainly that kind of stuff could slow down. In the last shutdown, I think because of the timing and everything, it was largely over the holidays. Tribal casinos still managed to do pretty well during that. They stayed open. The NIGC, wasn't, they weren't sorely missed, but okay, we might be fine from a regulatory standpoint with regards to gaming. But I can tell you right now, at the Department of Interior, Bureau of Indian Affairs, um, the DOJ, a lot of those services go away pretty quickly, Victor, for tribes, and uh, and that's where you see the real problem, and that's the day-to-day function stuff that keeps tribal leaders awake at night. If all of a sudden the buses, everything that was getting your tribal citizens to their
House medical,
appointments,
school.
exactly. Schools are now gone, and the tribes having to pick that up and do that. that's where it gets really scary. Police, a lot of policemen, some of them are paid through the Department of Interior. If that money's not coming in, they can't even afford gas for their police vehicles. And that was another issue during the last shutdown was tribal police departments were running out of funds just to get to work and back on time. So those things happened, Victor, last time. Tribes remember them well. We were Us and NCI were down here like hell trying to point out all these stories and everything. Uh, a bunch of senators, a lot of our friends were like, they were trying to do a workaround and help us get some of the funds, whether the state could pick up some things. But I don't know this time. It just seems like we're in a different era with a president who wants to take the whole government in a different direction. And if during a shutdown, a third of the people quit, or if they're furloughed and you tell them, hey, you may think you're going to get 6 weeks back pay for the time we made you sit at home, you're not getting paid. You're not getting 6 weeks of pay because the government was shut down. I mean, that's a huge leverage right there, Victor, that I'm sure they're thinking about as another way to, get another 10, 15% of the workforce to go get new jobs somewhere. But that is going to be some huge leverage. Again, we're going to come out of this with entirely looking different federal government.
Well, you live in Virginia. What do you see with
It's
the federal workers that have been laid off and quit and stuff like that? How does that affect you in your
well,
area?
it was big because Virginia, Maryland, even Delaware, all have significant portions of their population employed by the federal government. And by significant, I mean like 8 to 10%. But these are pretty well paying jobs, higher income paying jobs. And the people around here, also all the contractors as well in the DC area. So Virginia and Maryland had instituted very good programs right away to help displaced federal workers, but they're pissed. The other thing is, Victor, a lot of those resignations and early buyouts, those don't take effect till just this month, September. So you're going to see the real effects of what's been happening since January take place this fall. Another stress on the economy this fall. So September, October, uh, we're going to talk about that again at our mid-year. What's happening to the unemployment rate? Because there's all this noise out there. Like everyone predicted, interest rates would go up, unemployment would go up. Nothing's happened yet. Nothing's happened yet. But not a lot of the cuts have been implemented yet. So it's bad, Victor. The political Virginia has an off year election for governor, the whole 9 yards in their state legislature. They have elections coming up this November. So there's ads running all over the place. If this is a Democratic route, I think you're going to see it in Virginia, what the fallout can be when you start displacing federal workers or people start losing services. And I can tell you right now, the Republican candidate, Trump endorsed Republican candidate of Virginia, boy, when they started asking her about federal government cuts and everything, she heads for the hills. She won't answer any questions about it. But
Brazil.
she's nailing her coffin shut by not taking it directly head on and just saying, hey, he wanted to shrink the government. We're here to help our citizens get new jobs, whatever it is. But so from that standpoint, you're going to see a microcosm this fall of what's happening. The result of the federal layoffs and buyouts and all that. If it's compounded, that's why I wonder if the Trump administration will be like, let's just do a CR to Thanksgiving or something so that we don't put more stress on the economy as the tariffs are ramping up and everything else. That would make sense to me. What's a few weeks, but we'll see where they go with this. It's such a mess, Victor. I'm continually struck by we're not exactly the most optimistic people, but boy, is there just such pessimism around a shutdown. Everyone's almost guaranteeing it, whether it's the first week of October or a little later. Even out in New Mexico, Ben Ray Lujan was kind of telling tribes we need to be prepared for extended shutdown when you look at the numbers, it's not good for Johnson, the Speaker of the House. And I don't know how he's ever going to, satisfy 10 to 15 people unless Trump comes in and says, yeah, just take the deal. Well, he hasn't done that yet, Victor, right?
Right.
These guys back down when Trump tells them to, but you know, unless he tells them to, they're gonna upend everything. So
Well, it seems to be, when for tribes across the country, we're dealing with the big issue is consumer confidence. None of this instills confidence in the consumer when you have higher tariffs, higher prices. You see them at McDonald's, which, by the way, I mean, let's talk about McDonald's for a second. I mean, they
okay.
created a Happy Meal for adults. You know what I mean? And they just really created bad products. And my kid is sworn off McDonald's right now, which is so wonderful. He hasn't had it all summer, and he swore it off,
Uh-huh.
and it's the most wonderful thing not to have that in my life anymore. But the consumer confidence, people are getting pounded on all sides. You know what I mean? And they gambling. You're starting, like I said, you see Vegas and their new promotion. The Las Vegas Resort Association say they're going to be coming out with a new campaign to talk about the cheaper rates on the strip, lower visitation, but yet a higher revenue earnings last month. The tribes in California, we're going to see the same things. The tribes in Arizona are seeing the same things. God forbid, our poor brothers and sisters in New Mexico always get crushed when they have to deal with consumer confidence issues.
Yeah,
You know,
obviously, and especially when you're in a state where, incomes are lower, more
and New Mexico relies on tourism. You
right,
know,
right. And so it's a tough situation to be. I think, we've got, Christy Jackson, Tribal Financial Advisors, Klaus Robinson, James Klaus coming. They monitor this stuff day to day.
yeah.
They're our go-to people to sort of break it down for Indian country, and I look forward to what they have to say in front of our tribal leaders, because I don't think we're dealing with anything different than a lot of the corporations are in terms of uncertainty of where is this going to end? Are there going to be 50% tariffs on China goods or not? Is Trump going to take 10% of Walmart and Target and say, okay,
I was gonna
I'll
mention
keep
the
the
Intel
tariffs
deal.
off
I
as
was
long
gonna mention that, man. I didn't
yeah,
want to
I
go too
mean,
deep in the weeds.
yeah, I mean, I all of a sudden it's the same thing. Like he's just adopted Bernie Sanders policy
Wow.
of, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren were just, 15%
Hikers. They were
corporate
big
income
enough
tax, no
dreamers, man.
deductions. Yeah.
They were big enough dreamers.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. They should have thought like,
They suffer from the lack of imagination.
right,
You
right.
know. So, well, listen. And the other thing is that on Wednesday of next week, we leave for Minnesota. We'll be there on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We will
Right.
be talking about prediction markets and the latest news. I'll be monitoring a three-session a conversation about the threats of prediction markets, sweepstakes, and everything, running with
You know,
scissors, everything else, whatever it
yeah,
is.
we don't, I was laughing at Chris Sorodi's comment about
Yeah,
is,
Chris is the best.
does it include the resort fees of 49.99? But
Hysterical. And that's probably the cheapest one right
I
now.
know.
You know what I mean?
Uh,
So,
but all this is interconnected. Victor, we're going to talk about it briefly at our mid-year. Hopefully, we'll see folks in DC the following week, which is unfortunate timing. But really at G2E, I want to. I'm going to be. We'll have more economic data by then. We'll have two more jobs reports, hopefully, and we'll see where this is going. And I think it's all interconnected, sort of coming together in a weird way. That I'm just going to rely on the experts and keep reading as much as I can to so we can give our tribal casinos some kind of guidance, because I know that right now they're out there. Do you invest in this? Should we hold off? I know some more than a few people have told us, their projects, their expansions are really under threat. If the cost just it's continual line up, month over
hey,
month.
hey, when
Can't find
exactly in
workers
October? When exactly in October do you think this is? What's the date?
for.
The shutdown.
Oh, it'd be October 1st,
Jesus.
midnight. But yeah, I mean we'll see if they can get a
That's
CR
right.
thing.
September 30th is
Yeah,
the right. Okay, I
yeah.
remember now. September 30th is the final date.
The final, yeah, government's fiscal year, September to September. So, um, So, this is all coming together, Victor. And again, I want to see how the commercial industry is handling this. I think Vegas is sort of I just don't remember a time. I've been going to Vegas since the 80s, uh, where all of a sudden they were known as gougers, or just like, trying to squeeze their customers like this. And it's been building, and certainly since a lot of the corporations took over uh, properties on the strip, there's always been a fight over whether to charge for parking and all that kind of stuff. But you know, it's Vegas. They're supposed to be the best deal,
That
cheapest
was a
place to go.
long time
And
ago.
now if you can find,
That went out with the showgirl, man.
yeah,
You know what I mean? That went out with the showgirl.
the
They,
low dollar table limits. I mean, those are
yeah.
long gone. I don't know how anyone really can afford to gamble there with $25 tables. It's
I follow John Mahaffey on Twitter, and that's John's things is going through every casino and look at the tables and the slots and the payoff, and it's always like a horror story whenever he makes us. You just see that there's no bargains in Vegas. There's no
yeah, it's
bargains. And then they shut
so,
down Prim too, so
mhm. It's
so it's just go
fabulous.
home.
Yeah, go.
Well, listen, let's be honest. Look at the tribes in California. Let's be honest. There's no reason while the feeder market, the tribes have created phenomenal properties that match Vegas. Vegas is Vegas, and we all love Vegas, and we always will love Vegas. But if you're on a budget and gas is expensive and rent is, and you want to have a good time, why drive to Vegas? So the tribes will be doing the same things. You can expect. They announced, like I said, the Las Vegas Resorts Convention Association,
Yes.
the Convention
I mean,
Association.
maybe they're a few years away from really, the airport is still pretty much crap. Getting in and out of the Vegas airport is always some kind of line, uh, especially high peak hours. They've never solved that. The monorail was supposed to take a lot of the pressure off getting up and down the strip. That was a flop. Uh, they got the tunnel,
Oh my
Musk's
God.
tunnel,
Oh
whatever the
my
hell's going
God.
on with that.
Oh my God.
Uh, maybe they're a few a few years away from getting a lot of the technology there that might, I don't know, make the customer.
Never count out Las Vegas, man.
Yeah, I
You
agree,
never
because they
count
were
those
left for
guys. They're
dead
the
in the
best and the
80s.
brightest in the industry,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, exactly. So, but well, that's all Victor, and like you said, we're off next week.
Yeah,
Uh,
we're in Minnesota. We hope
yeah,
to see you guys out there, but we'll be back and we'll be, I guess to wrap it up, AB 831 in California is on rails. It's moving through. My sources say there's enough votes in the Senate and the Assembly for it to pass. Governor Newsom will sign it when it gets to his desk. The next fight after that, DFS plus, what does that mean? And then obviously prediction markets. Don't take your eye off the ball.
right,
That's where the big threat is and stuff like that. So, there's so many ways to talk about this, but listen, we will be talking about it in person. We will be talking, there'll be lots of great conversations in G2E.
right.
And I think the big conversation here is, does it force the tribes to get into online gaming sooner than planned? You
Mhm.
know what I mean? They're holding firm and steady on shooting for 2028, but that's 2.5 years around. From a year from now, and the market's going to be populated.
Right,
Well, they lost the first mover advantage.
right.
So that's the
Well,
reality.
yeah, like Mike Carter said, we'll look forward to seeing folks at G2E. Stop by our booth. We've got the big booth again. We'll be doing something on Tuesday, Tribal Leaders Lounge, and just hanging out. So we'll
Yeah, G2E's been great. We always have a phenomenal show. We have great relationships with the AGA and Reed, and it's always, listen. If you want to be in the middle of everything and no one's it's been a year since the vampire party, the last one I went to with the sweepstakes, remember?
right. Yes.
So a whole year. It's what's incredible what a year can make. But yeah, so sweepstakes is pretty much dead in California. Then we take our attention to, and then there was a lawsuit against stake in crypto out of this LA City attorney. I'm working about getting a meeting with the LA City attorney and their consultants right now to talk more about strategy and stuff like that. So, as that Nicholas Rossi and said, the game is afoot. You know what I mean? So we look forward to it. And so, listen, I hope this was a good conversation to you.
Yeah,
Very often, do Jason and I get to talk, but this is how we normally talk, and
really,
converse.
we want people to this fall we've committed, Victor, to sort of integrating all those topics that we just brought up because you can just see it converging. And especially with the way everything's moving so fast, that I encourage people to look up that super intelligence. I just was like, there, if you're going to sink $200 billion into something, you know, it- it's something you never know the unintended consequences of that kind of commitment to infrastructure. It might spin off other things. So,
I thought you were going to say getting back your return.
oh, I don't.
You know what I mean? That's where the commitment is, regardless of the impact and
Did
stuff
we
like
get
that.
back our return on all the moon exploration and
Wow.
dumping tons of money into?
Wow. Well, listen, everyone, thank you so much. We'll see you guys very soon. We'll be back in 2 weeks. And then, listen, I'm working on G2E agenda. It's almost done. We have to talk about Barcelona. You know what I mean? That's going to be, what do we talk about in Barcelona? I think we should talk about how to smuggle your products into the US through the Canadian border. Bringing the Mohawks, we'll bring the Kanawakis.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's going to be an interesting conversation in Barcelona. And then, working on the agenda for next year, our show in San Diego, which will be chock full of incredible conversations.
Right.
The last one was phenomenal. The next one will be even better. So, if we're still alive, you know what I
Right.
mean? So, all right, everyone. Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much.
Jason, it's always great
Care,
talking to you,
Victor.
brother. I'll talk to
Alrighty.
you soon. All right, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. Okay. We'll see you
Bye.
soon. Bye.